Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 325 of TowerGate, Sunday, January the 28th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's great to be with you guys. Let me get my camera straight here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Minor technical difficulty if I can speak. I haven't talked all day. Let's see how I do. Okay, before I get into today's news, wanted to make a comment. I believe it was Peter who noticed the aircraft sitting to my immediate left and questioning whether or not that was the P-51 Mustang. And yes, of course, this is the P-51 Mustang. Finest aircraft, probably the entire Second World War. For many of you who are not really airplane aficionados or don't know much about the aircraft used in World War II, pretty extraordinary aircraft, and a lot of people don't realize this, but that actually was originally to be a British aircraft. It was a British company that came up with the idea for the P-51 Mustang. They put out the contract for companies to bid on it, and an American company won the contract. But they wanted to make some modifications and some changes. It ended up really being a joint, sort of a joint project by the time they got to the fourth plane, because they had the A, the B, the C, the D. By the time they got to the P-51D, of course, it was really a joint aircraft between British and the United States. Just some of the specs on this incredible airplane. First of all, it was in fact the very best dogfighting aircraft of World War II. It was the first edition came out in 1940, the A version, and of course it was used both in Europe and in the Pacific. It was, of course, used primarily, it was a dogfighter. Of course, it escorted lots of the B-25s and B-17s on their bombing missions. Of course, the D version, of course, had that incredible Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in it, which produced about 1,700 horsepower. And, of course, the Americans came up with that wing design, which is what allowed the P-51 to have such incredible speed and maneuverability. It could achieve speeds of 435 miles per hour. It had 650 caliber machine guns, Browning machine guns. It had a 1,000-mile range, which eventually they were able to actually get it up to around 1,400 mile range when they started flying missions directly into Tokyo. Of course, it had the most advanced gun sight of any plane in the World War II era, way ahead of its time. And just an extraordinary aircraft, and my favorite aircraft of World War II, the P-51 Mustang. What an airplane. And in case you've never heard a P-51 Mustang do a flyby, they're very, very loud. We occasionally get them up here. You know, I live about 20 minutes from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and about 15 minutes away from the original factory where the Wright brothers began developing the first airplane. It was actually a bicycle factory, and they converted it into an airplane factory, and that's very close to me. But there's a story, just to tell you how dominant this airplane was. There was a group of 8 P-51s that encountered 40 to 50 German Me-109s over Germany, and these 8 P-51s took on 40 to 50 German Me-109s. They had 38 kills, planes they actually shot out of the sky, 38 out of somewhere between 48 and 50, and it was done with 8 P-51s. So that shows you what a dominant aircraft it was in its time. What a fantastic aircraft. Okay, so that's the P-51. Very well done. I think it was Peter who asked about that. So yeah, that's the P-51. Okay, yesterday I talked a little bit about this letter that was sent off to these various Democrats, Robbie Mook and John Podesta and Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman-Schultz, Donna Brazile, and various other people, Democrats from the Clinton campaign. So we can see now that the investigation is now moving towards looking at the role that the DNC and the Democrats and the Rotten Reverend Clinton, the Hillary for America campaign, were seeing what role they played in the dossier. And of course we just learned that the State Department, in addition to all these other agencies, were involved as well. Now, I am going to put a link in the description, just below the description box in this video, so you can go over and read this. It only takes about 5 minutes to read. It has only like a 2-paragraph intro, and then it asks 12 questions. And basically what Grassley is saying is that you've got 2 weeks to answer these questions in letter form. And of course, if they don't do it, then he'll subpoena them to come in for hearings, to come in a probably closed session, but he'll subpoena them to come in and give testimony personally. So he's given them the opportunity to respond to his 12 questions by letter. Now, you got to read these 12 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link there. It only takes 5 minutes to read, and it's a PDF document right off the Senate's website. So I'm going to put that link there. You definitely want to go check it out. Read those 12 questions. They're doozies. They're questions that you definitely do not want to answer if you're Hillary, Podesta, Mook, Brazil, Blabbermouth, Wassman, Schultz. You do not want to have to answer any of these questions or provide any of the documents requested. So yeah, go ahead, click on that link, go over to that link and take a look at that Senate Judiciary Committee Q&A form for these Democrats sent out by Senator Grassley. Click on the link and check it out. You'll like those questions. They're exactly the questions I would be asking. Okay. And let's keep in mind also, in addition to the fact that this investigation is now turning towards looking at the role that the Democratic National Committee, the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign, and her minions, and what role they had in the dossier. Don't forget that they recently reopened the investigation into the Clinton Foundation, which is being run out of Little Rock, Arkansas by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. So yes, the walls are closing in and the noose is tightening around the neck of the Rotten Reverend and her friends. Now, we have a problem. We have a problem. Somebody is lying. In the last 2 videos, we've talked about Edward Baumgartner, who was working for Fusion GPS, and now appears to have been the intermediary, or one of the intermediaries, to Christopher Steele. And we have recently discovered an interview done by Mr. Baumgartner back in January of 2017. And in this interview, he stated the following, quote, "I was never made aware of Chris Steele's work on the dossier, and it was kept that way deliberately. I would have nothing to add to it anyway. I was never made aware of Chris Steele's work on the dossier, and it was kept that way deliberately. I would have nothing to add to it anyway." That is what Baumgartner said back in January of 2017 in an interview. But in his testimony, Glenn, going to the slammer Simpson of Confusion GPS, told the Senate Judiciary Committee that, quote, "Baumgartner helped Steele figure out which hotels Trump stayed in Russia, and if anyone ever offered him anything while there. Mostly, he read Russian newspaper reports and that sort of thing." So here we have Simpson telling the Senate Judiciary Committee that he helped Steele and worked right along with Steele. But we have Baumgartner saying he had nothing to do with it and never really worked on the dossier, never really worked together with Steele. Somebody is lying. Now, I generally question people who, when you ask them a question such as this, and they make the statement, in this case, like Mr. Baumgartner did, where he says, "I was never made aware of Chris Steele's work." Now, that should have been the end of his statement, if he's just responding to whether or not he had any interaction or any part of the dossier with Steele. But one way that you can tell a lot of times that people are lying is when they don't just stop with a single denial of something. They continue to pile on it and add more to it, as if they're really having to defend themselves against a lie, because it is a lie. So listen to what he does. He says, "I was never made aware of Chris Steele's work." That should have been the end of it. But he doesn't stop there. He has to add on the dossier. And it was kept that way. It was kept that way. By who? Who decided it should be kept that way? See, that raises another question. He says it was kept that way deliberately. He's having to add to his statement to back it up, because apparently he doesn't feel that just stating, "I was never made aware of Chris Steele's work" on the dossier, apparently that wasn't a strong enough denial for him. So he had to continue to add more to it by saying that he was kept that way deliberately. Then he goes on and adds again, "I would have nothing to add to it anyway." That generally indicates that the person is lying. So, somebody is lying, and both of these guys, Christopher Steele and Mr. Baumgartner, were on the payroll for Confusion GPS. Excuse me. Alrighty. Many people in the DOJ and the FBI are going to jail. I've been saying this, and I know I still see people in the comment section. I still hear people talking, other comments from other videos I watch and things and such. And a lot of people still just can't believe it, and I can understand why you could not believe it. Now, I'm not even talking about the investigation into the Clinton Foundation, pay for play. I'm not talking about the Uranium One issues. I'm not even talking about the obvious rotten Reverend Clinton mishandling classified information and violating the Espionage Act. Just simply based on this dossier issue and the deep state coup related stuff, just on that alone, the rotten Reverend Clinton and many around her in the FBI and DOJ are going to jail. And here is an example of why. On the 99-page FISA court document, even though there are many redactions, if you read it and you get all the way down and scroll down to the summary section, you will find that it states in the summary section the following, quote, 85% of FISA section 704 and 705B searches were violations of the Fourth Amendment, quote, unlawful, non-compliant with applicable laws, and thereby criminal. That's what it says in the 99-page FISA court document after their investigation of those FISA searches. That is in the summary at the bottom of the document. 85% of FISA Section 704 and 705B searches were violations of the Fourth Amendment, unlawful, non-compliant with applicable laws, and therefore criminal. That's what it says. That's why many in the DOJ and FBI and the Obama administration are going to jail. In addition, the 99-page FISA court doc also states that the FBI and the DOJ were providing information to outside contractors who had no business or legal cause to have the information. That is a huge crime. And that is why people in the FBI, DOJ, and Obama administration are going to jail. Forget all the other things going on. Yes, there's probably violations there and other people going to jail as a result of those things. But just this one thing that we're talking about, of which there are many. It's crime. Pick a crime. Any crime. There's so many to pick from. The question is not, are there going to be people going to jail for these crimes? It's which crimes it going to be. The rotten reverend could be facing multi-hundred count indictments. Now, keep in mind, as we continue to peel back the onion, that the underlying theme behind all of this, and why this was done, and why all this was done so carelessly, was because Hillary was never supposed to lose. She was supposed to win. But she didn't win. And now, there's a shortage of lawyers in the D.C. swamp. That's the whole thing, that we have to never forget the underlying issue here. That's the backdrop to this whole thing about why all this was done, why all this happened, why they did it so carelessly, and all this type of thing, is they never thought this day would come. Hillary was supposed to win. They couldn't imagine any scenario under which the rotten Reverend Clinton could lose. After all, she had $1.2 billion. She had the entire corporate media on her side. New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, BuzzFeed, the Huffington Post, Politico. They had all the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. They had PBS. They had all the other news stations. The only one really that was somewhat for Fox, to some extent, a couple people on Fox, a couple people for Trump was on Fox. But all the other major newspapers, major media networks, cable networks like CNN, MSNBC, all pushing for the rotten Reverend Clinton. All the Europeans in the New World Order were pushing for the rotten Reverend Clinton. Plus, they couldn't imagine how she could possibly lose because they had the FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, the DOJ NSD, apparently the State Department, and everyone else working to put together a frame-up and a fake Russian narrative to try to take Trump down. They launched bimbo eruptions on him. They did everything they possibly could. She had all that going for her, and she even had a vagina. Yet, none of that was good enough to defeat the Trumpster. They could not possibly imagine any scenario by which they could lose. They just couldn't even comprehend it. There was too many things they had going their way. They just couldn't imagine how Trump could overcome all of that. But he did. And he did because you are not stupid. The rotten Reverend Clinton, of course, she did pass out like a sack of potatoes, had to be thrown into the Scooby van like a sack of potatoes. Of course, she had a bad habit of going out in public with those Chairman Mao poop-stained pantsuits due to a leaking colostomy bag and being photographed. Of course, she had to be helped up and down stairs. She couldn't hardly give a speech without coughing her lungs out and not being able to get through it, including in one speech where she actually spit up some sort of a hard green thing into a glass of water. She didn't think it was important to go to Wisconsin. She called half the country deplorables. So really, had Hillary just stayed home and let all the people who were working on her behalf do their thing, she probably would have won. It was her going out there and having appearances is probably why she lost. I mean, she even stooped so low that she went to a local black radio station and pulled out a bottle of hot sauce and basically let them know that she knows that those colored peoples down in the ghetto like that hot sauce on their chicken. And so she always carries some hot sauce for her chicken too, because she's one of you. That's right. The rotten Reverend Clinton carries her own bottle of hot sauce. That's what she said to that black radio station, speaking to the colored peoples down there in the ghetto, hoping they would come out and vote for her. Well, she likes that hot sauce, and I'll tell you what, she says I guess she puts it on everything, that hot sauce. Probably even puts it on her bearded clam. That would be probably her little friend Huma. And she's thinking that Huma is screaming like a crazy woman because Hillary probably believes she's got the skills of an Oriental lickmaster from the Far East, when in fact, no, Reverend, it's because you're pouring hot sauce on Huma's vagina. That's why she's screaming. Not because of your skills. No, the rotten Reverend Clinton spit the bit. She was never supposed to lose, and that's how they got where they are now. And it's going to get much worse. Now, as we keep moving forward, we keep finding almost every day as we peel back another layer of the onion, more characters popping up. This is why I say there'll be hundreds of people going to jail, because there's many, many people involved in this multi-tier conspiracy. So now we have new names popping up onto the radar. We have some new names of individuals that were contractors or employees of Fusion GPS that we've not even heard of. These new names coming forward now are David Michaels, Taylor Sears, Patrick Corcoran, Laura Sego, Jay Bagwell, and Erica Castro. That is in addition to what we learned about a week ago about Sidney Blumenthal. And now we have his right-hand man, Cody Shearer, also a close associate of the Clintons. And of course we know that Mr. Blumenthal specializes in running smear campaigns against the political opponents of the Clintons. And what about John Podesta? He met with Simpson the day after the election. Why would he do that? The election's over. So why would Podesta need to meet with Glenn Simpson? Now, Podesta said in his statement when he was being testifying in Congress, sitting right next to Mark Elias, who paid for the dossier, said that he knew nothing about the dossier until BuzzFeed published it. Yet, he's sitting there the day, which was January the 10th. But 2 months prior to that, the day after the election, he's sitting there talking to the man who created the dossier. You don't think that conversation came up? Podesta thinks we're all stupid. But we're not stupid, and he's going to be caught in those lies. He's one of the people that's going to be getting that letter that hopefully you all are going to go read after you click on the link in the description box, and you're going to see that Mr. Podesta is going to have some difficult questions to answer, and I'm not even going to go into what we've heard about that artwork hanging on the wall in his home. I understand it's pretty disturbing, to say in the least. You see, my friends, when I tell you that many people are going to jail, I'm not bullshitting you. Many people are going to jail in this little fiasco. Now, as you know, I've made it perfectly clear that I think that Christopher Steele was merely the turnaround man, the laundry man, the cleaner, the guy who was fed the dossier. His main 2 points was to be the face of the dossier, to give it credibility, but also because he could spread it to the intelligence community where Fusion GPS really couldn't, because they were the producers and they were the ones working for the client, the Rotten Reverend Clinton. But also we have Mr. Baumgartner working for Fusion GPS, and now it appears that he was the one feeding Christopher Steele. So we have Fusion GPS, they've got Baumgartner working for them. They have Baumgartner reading open source material from Russian newspapers, Russian magazines, Russian propaganda, feeding that to Steele. He puts that in his memo, sends it to Fusion GPS. And so basically this was just a way that they could use another straw man, just like they used Mark Elias. And this is what the whole dossier, if you look at it, it's really a direct document from the Rotten Reverend Clinton working with insiders within the DOJ and the FBI and Fusion GPS. That's where the kernel is, the center, the nucleus of all of it. And everything else was just smoke and mirrors to be diversionary or to give credibility. So it all pretty much comes down to just what I said over the last couple of weeks. I've been saying that this all is riding really on Christopher Steele's shoulders. Everything. Because if you look at the only defense that the perps have is that the dossier was mostly true. That the information in the dossier was dug up by this super spy, Christopher Steele, and therefore it had the credibility. And it was based on Christopher Steele's credibility that the FBI and the DOJ and all these perps are going to say that Susan Rice and Samantha Power, they're all going to say that they believed it was true because it came from such a solid dude. It came from Christopher Steele, this former British super spy. And of course, we can assume that because he's such a super spy that he wouldn't get any of this wrong. It would all be right. But this is the only legal defense they can possibly use. They certainly can't sit there and say, yes, we knew it was bullshit and we used it anyway to get FISA warrants to launch the Russian Trump narrative. They can't do any of that. They only have one position. It's the same position that BuzzFeed is defending themselves in court using that exact argument. They're putting it all on, hey, we thought Steele's information was credible. We have the same thing by Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson in his testimony and in his lawsuits that he's facing. The same thing. The only course of defense he has is, hey, we believed Christopher Steele. We believed what was in the dossier. That's what he told the Senate committee when they asked Simpson whether or not he verified any of the information. He said, oh no, I don't speak Russian. I've never been to Russia. I was relying totally on the integrity of Christopher Steele. Everyone was relying heavily on the integrity of Christopher Steele. Now, we know this is all bullshit because Fusion GPS created the document along with the insiders at the Clinton campaign and the DOJ and FBI. But this is the only thing that they have. This is the only defense that they have, and it's going to be broken down and destroyed. Part of it will be the release of the memo, but it'll be more information that will come forward, and specifically when they sit down and question Mr. Baumgartner and any of these other so-called intermediaries. So, you know, Christopher Steele has got the weight of the world riding on his shoulders. Everyone's ass is on the line, and it's all riding on Christopher Steele's integrity, that he's the one who produced the dossier, and therefore it must be true because he's such a great guy and a super spy. He wouldn't get it wrong. But when you look at the depositions in the court case that's going on in the UK and in Florida, we can see in those depositions that Christopher Steele is now saying that it's only a possibility that the information is true. He's saying that the final memo, the real damaging one, that it was unverified. He's also saying that he never went out and got this information. It was never sought, but it was only received. So he, in his own defense, trying to cover his own butt, is having to distance himself from the dossier, while everyone else has to use his integrity and the dossier, the integrity of the dossier, to try to save their butt, because it's the only defense they have, and that defense is breaking down rapidly. Now, I don't know if Christopher Steele watches my videos. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. He's probably quite paranoid and maybe quite interested in any information he can get about what's happening, because he knows eventually the time is going to come where he is going to have to put up or shut up. He's going to have to sit in front of a grand jury, or in front of in a civil suit or in a criminal suit, or he's going to have to come before Congress, whether it's open or closed session. He is going to have to face the music. He is going to have to, at some point, fish or cut bait. He's going to have to tell the truth. So, if you're watching out there right now, Chris, here's what I have for you. Chris, it's a tough deal. I know you thought originally you were just going to pick up an easy 168 grand, won't have to work too hard, take this information that was being fed to you and simply send it back to Fusion GPS and let them use your name and your credibility, and you're going to collect 168 grand. It was an easy pickup. It was low-hanging fruit, and none of this other stuff was ever supposed to happen, and you would have helped the rotten Reverend Clinton win the election and keep Trump from winning, who you despised. That's how it was supposed to work out. But it hasn't worked out that way, Chris. And now everyone is counting on you to pull their chestnuts out of the fire. But you can't do that, can you, Chris? Because ultimately, the truth is going to come out. So it's a question now, Chris, of whether or not you put an end to this charade now, limit the liability and the damage, turn and become state's witness against the perps, come clean and tell the truth, and it will set you free. A lot of people are counting on you, Chris. I know the weight of the world is on your shoulders right now. Everything is on you. So what do you do, Chris? I'm telling you, come clean. Turn yourself in. Admit that this was all just a huge mistake, that you never intended for any of this to happen, that this was simply a chance for you to pick up, 168 grand for doing very little work. You were happy to assist in defeating Donald Trump because you didn't like him, and that was all this was ever supposed to be. It was never supposed to enter into a major criminal conspiracy. You never intended for your work to be used to secure FISA documents, FISA requests, surveillance. You were never intended to do anything criminal or be part of a criminal conspiracy. You just got sucked into this thing. That's the truth, Chris. You got sucked into it by the rotten Reverend Clinton. You were used. You were used just like the Clintons use everyone. And, of course, as you know, most people who are connected to the Clintons are either dead or in jail. Now, Chris, you don't have to end up that way. You're still a relatively young man. Yes, you're going to take a hit. Your business will probably fail. But maybe you can write a book or do a movie. But the truth will set you free, Chris. It will also bring this three-ring circus to conclusion. And we can all get the truth and we can move on. And if you turn and become a witness to the government, you can maybe cut a deal to avoid jail time. That is what you should do, Chris. If you continue to stick with these people and run this game out, they will throw you to the wolves, Chris. The Clintons will not have your back. Mr. Podesta will not have your back. The FBI will not have your back. The DOJ will not have your back. Not Obama, not Lynch, not Comey, not Strozik, not Page, none of them, not Mr. and Mrs. Orr, Bruce and Nellie, even Mr. Baumgartner will probably stick it to you. Yes, coming out and telling the truth will mean that BuzzFeed's going to lose their case, but they're going to lose anyway. Yes, it will mean that Glenn is going to be going to the slammer. Glenn Simpson will be going to the slammer, probably along with his partner. Yes, it will mean that there will be large payouts in these civil suits. Yes, it will mean lots of people within the FBI, the DOJ, the State Department, the Obama administration will go to jail, of course. But you can stay out of jail, Chris. All you got to do is come clean, tell the truth, clear your conscience, so we can all move on. That's what we really want. We're just trying to get to the truth. And I've been in pursuit of it for a very long time, Chris. And I've been watching you. And I'm pretty sure you got sucked into something that you never probably wanted to be a part of. You've never proven in the past that you've been part of any major criminal conspiracies. You're just a dishonest spy doing what dishonest spies do. Lying. That's what you get paid to do. You were pretty good at it. But this time it didn't work out. Now, Chris, you put your money on a vagina and it didn't work out. Things happen. But you can turn it all around right here, Chris. You can clear your conscience. You can get the truth out. Bring this whole thing to a close. And maybe keep yourself out of jail. That's where you stand right now, Chris. It's time to make some tough decisions. I think that the members of the committee, maybe a prosecutor, will be sympathetic to your cause. You were played. You were used by the rotten reverend and her minions, and now they've left you in a position that's untenable. You know you can't back up the dossier. You can't even go into a court and even talk about it because it's hearsay evidence, because you never talked to any of them sources, did you, Chris? You used an intermediary. And who was the intermediary? Well, we know for sure it was Mr. Baumgartner and probably Nellie, maybe talking to you with her ham radio. Whatever the details are in this sordid tale, Chris, you don't have to go down. You don't have to go down. There's another way out, and it's called the truth. Come clean, Chris. That's my advice to you. Come clean. And let's wrap this thing up so we can get on with making America great again, Chris. Maybe you can move here and escape that socialist hellhole you live in now, unless you enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been today's TowerGate video, Sunday, day 325, I believe it is. Look forward to being back with you tomorrow on Monday to try to decide who the dumbass of the week is going to be. And right now, I can't decide. I'm torn. I may need your help. I'll be back tomorrow. You guys have a good evening. Enjoy your Sunday. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.